Hi, this is Dr. Mercola, and today we're going to talk about one of the controversies in health, and that is the use of soy or the perception of soy as a health food. And let me give you a little bit of the history. The reason this is the case is largely related to something that occurred a number of years ago when the tropical oils were used in large part in this country for many indications in industry. And the tropical oils such as palm and coconut oil obviously are not grown in the United States because we don't have tropical environments except for Hawaii. And as a result of this, they wanted to shift that. So there's this movement in an effort to demonize and vilify those oils and remove them and identify them as health-damaging oils and substitute domestically grown oils like soy and corn and others, but primarily soy. And for the large part, they've been fairly successful, and there's been this whole campaign to paint soy in a healthy light. Now, the information I have to share with you may disappoint and may challenge many vegetarians because they use soy as one of their primary sources of protein. But I'm here to tell you that it is my strong belief, after studying this very carefully, that unless you're having fermented soy, you're having a problem. And I'll tell you the reasons why. But the fermented soy would be foods like natto, miso, and tempeh. And this does not include tofu. Tofu is not fermented, so that definitely falls into the category of soy that you want to avoid. And why do you want to avoid it? Well, in contemporary society, one of the primary reasons is that somewhere between 90 and probably closer to 95% of the soy grown domestically is genetically modified soy. And why do they do this to soy? Well, they do it because they incorporate a gene into the soy plant that essentially provides resistance against the pesticide called Roundup. Monsanto is the manufacturer of Roundup and also the producer of the seed that produces the Roundup resistance, interestingly. So what happens is when you plant this Roundup-resistant soy, the farmers grow it, and then they were able to spray this toxic pesticide and herbicide into soy plants, and it very effectively kills pretty much all the plants except for the soy plants. And so that you're able to get a very effective harvest and really radically decrease the cost of production. But that doesn't do anything with respect to the negative side effects and harm of genetically modified foods. And what some of the newer research is showing is that many of the damages and harm really isn't even occurring in those who eat it. It's occurring in the second and the third generations. And we know this by studying rats, which have much shorter life spans than we do, and we can see these occurrences at a much accelerated rate. And what some of these studies have shown, recent studies, is that by the time you get to the third generations, many of these families of rats that have been exposed to these genetically modified foods are actually infertile and sterile. So these are some of the concerns, and there's certainly many others. And I've written extensively about this. We work with Jeffrey Smith, who's one of the leaders in the United States in a movement towards really restricting the use of genetically modified foods in the United States, as they have done in Europe, primarily through consumer awareness and action to motivate industry. Because there's no government regulation against it. It's just that consumers are aware enough that they refuse to purchase GMO food. So that's probably the primary issue. But even if you were fortunate enough to choose the 5% or so of soy that is organically grown, there's still concerns, and let me review those with you now. One is that there are goitrogens in soy. And goitrogens are inhibitors of thyroid functions. And a common source of soy is soy milk. And many people consume that as an alternative to milk or one of their primary beverages. And that really is a concern because you're able to get large amounts of this soy. And it's a significant contributor to thyroid dysfunction or hypothyroidism in women in this country. So if you're a woman and you're struggling with low thyroid function and you're consuming soy milk, the biggest clue is to stop drinking that immediately. Now, as long as we're talking about women, we can also talk about some of the estrogen components, which are typically the isoflavones that are in soy. And some actually recommend and use these therapeutically to treat menopausal type symptoms, but I believe the evidence is really controversial whether or not that really works, and even more importantly, it may cause some disturbance in endocrine function. So that is definitely a significant concern. The other component is that there's phytic acid in there, and phytic acid is something that will inhibit and impair the absorption of minerals. Now, sometimes that's good, especially in postmenopausal women or in most adult men, because we tend to have two levels of iron that are too high, which can be a very potent oxidant stress. But it doesn't necessarily selectively inhibit iron absorption. It inhibits all of the ones, the beneficial minerals like magnesium and calcium and copper and zinc, and all the important minerals that form as catalysts and very important enzyme functions. So this is something that we need to be aware of. As I mentioned, tofu is not a fermented soy, so that is one that should be avoided also. But some of the other ones that are really common would be soy protein, isolated soy protein powder that you find in many protein bars, many protein drinks, powder drinks that you would put together. And this is really not a naturally produced substance. It's really processed in a way that they have an acid wash. There's aluminum in there, and many times MSG is added. So these are things you want to avoid. We don't, especially MSG, because we know from fairly clear scientific documentation that it's an excitotoxin. It can actually lead to neurological damage. So you clearly want to avoid foods with MSG, and soy protein isolate is clearly one of them. So avoid that one for sure. But perhaps one of the most serious ones that you want to be really cautious about is the soy infant formula. And of course, what we absolutely recommend for every single woman who has a child is to breastfeed. There's just no questions. And interestingly, the conventional physicians, American Academy of Pediatrics, also recommend this and strongly recommend it for the first 6 months of life. I mean, the evidence is just absolutely beyond overwhelming that this is going to be the absolute best thing, the type of nutrition or approach of feeding possible for the infant. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, many of them may be economic or convenience, or just inability, many women choose not to breastfeed their child, so then they're left with options, which typically are conventional formula. And because of the problems with conventional formula, many children are allergic to it, and they choose soy as an option that they can tolerate. And unfortunately, the soy is far worse than conventional formula, which is not really good at all. So the reasons why is typically soy formula is very high in these phytoestrogen components, and it can have levels that are 20,000 times higher than birth control pills that reach in the child's blood after consuming these for a long time. But they're also very high in some toxic minerals such as aluminum and manganese at very high concentrations. So clearly, if you have a child, or one of your friends or neighbors who is in this predicament, and just tell them to avoid the soy formula. There's more information on my site, but it's clearly a formula that should, I believe, be banned and barred from commercial sale, and should be illegal to sell in the United States. So what are you going to do if you're unable to breastfeed? Well, we actually have on our site the infant formula fortification protocol, so that you can look up and just type that in the search engine, and it will give you the specific details on how to use regular raw milk combined with other nutrients such as some of the essential fatty acids and some other components to actually provide a source of nutrition that will cause your child to thrive and really avoid many of the conventional illnesses that we're exposed to because they're receiving optimal nutrition. So that would be the primary recommendation there. Other forms of soy that are present that you could expose to would be soy oil. It's an omega-6 oil like many of the other ones. Normally, if you have any type of processed foods, and 95% of the foods we eat are processed, it's going to have this in there, so you really want to stay away from it because most of us get way too much omega-6 oils, and the omega-6 oils have some essential or double bonds, essential fats in there, and not essential necessarily, but bonds which are susceptible to oxidative damage. So they're in the processing, they can be oxidized, and we just get too many of these in omega-6, and our omega-6 to omega-3 ratio becomes imbalanced, and that can be the cause of many diseases. So I definitely stay away from the soy oil. Soy cheese is another one, soy yogurt. These are all foods that have the soy and the soy ingredients that I mentioned earlier that can contribute to health problems. So there's a lot more information on this page that you can read more specifics and details, but I would definitely encourage you to read it. If you're skeptical, review the evidence. There's actually even books written about this to document this information in very clear detail with all the science, all the references, all this, the validation in the scientific literature that you'll need to believe and research this, that it's true. It's at least something you need to avoid. So again, the only form of soy that you really want to consider taking would be natto, which is a fermented soy product. It's a bit of a challenge to get. It's usually only in Asian food stores, but it's very high in vitamin K2, which is a phenomenal vitamin, really kind of a partner with vitamin D in producing a variety of many significant benefits, such as cancer and reduction, and also improvement in bone density and reduction in heart disease. So that's very important. Probably the single most highest concentration of vitamin K2 on the planet is in this form of fermented soy called natto, but you could also get it in miso and tempeh. These are, no, don't have the vitamin K2, but these are fermented forms of soy, and the fermentation process, the degradation of the bacteria is actually able to metabolize and break down these the goitrogens and the other elements that are in soy that I mentioned that are potentially harmful to you in the isoflavones. So that's why the fermented soy is okay, and that's probably actually a health food, so that one's fine. So many times there's just so much information out there. We just really are challenged to have the time to really explore carefully how this information was provided, or what were the motivations behind spreading that information. In fact, in the case of soy, as I mentioned, the motivations appear to be not to your benefit, but really so that it could promote the sale of the domestic soy in the United States and increase their profits for doing that. So really, the purpose of this site is to gather this information, present it to you, provide it with you, at least open your mind to this possibility so that you can do your independent research, you can validate this for yourself, your friends, your family, and because the internet is a great resource, it allows you to do this pretty easily. And really, with this information, there's power, so that you can stay away from things that are going to lead you down the wrong path and towards illness and disease, and really help you and your family continue to take control of your health.